Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I look stupid. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about SIBO. I mentioned in my health introduction video that this is one of the things that I had been diagnosed with so far. None of my doctors think it's the full picture, so that's why I still say I'm undiagnosed or still figuring it out. But I do have this one diagnosis, which has been helpful because it has put me on a little bit of a path. So what is SIBO? And I'm going to be reading directly from Johns Hopkins. Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, however you say it, occurs when there is an excess bacteria in the small intestine. SIBO often happens because of a lack of movement in the small intestine. Okay, so basically what that means is that you have too much bacteria in your small intestine and it can cause all of these bad symptoms. The main characteristics of SIBO, although it varies so much person to person that it's hard to say, is bloating and gas, so like trapped gas in your stomach, which can cause cramping. Also change in bowel movements can be a sign. A lot of things, honestly, that are associated with IBS. They're finding now that sometimes IBS is actually misdiagnosed, and there's a couple ways that they can test for it. The most common is a breath test. So basically you go into the office and you breathe into this tube, and you've done a special fasting diet beforehand, and this is to establish a baseline, how much gas is in your breath, and that's how they measure it, by the gas, before you put any of the triggering substances in your body. Then you drink a solution, usually it's lactulose or some other type of sucrose sugar drink. It's not great, but it's not terrible. And then you breathe into a tube every 20 minutes for 1 to 2 hours. And then they look at your gas levels in your breath. And the two things that they're mainly looking at are hydrogen and methane. You can have elevated levels of both or neither, which would mean you're negative for SIBO. If you have both, then you have both kinds, or you could have one or the other. The two are associated with slightly different symptoms, which I can put a link so you can do more research below. Just because you have one or the other doesn't necessarily mean your symptoms are going to be the ones that are most common. Really knowing what type you have is more helpful for treatment because there's different approaches that are usually taken. So I had the hydrogen dominant kind. However, I did have methane gas present in my breath test. And so for me, that explained why some of the symptoms I was having were more consistent with the methane type of SIBO. So once you're diagnosed with SIBO, you have kind of a lot of decisions you can make. I'm not going to advocate necessarily one or the other, more kind of just give you some of the overview of your options. Of course, I'm not saying these are the only options. Please do your own research, talk to your own doctors. But anyway, let's get into it. So one of the first things is finding a doctor. So maybe you did the breath test at a doctor's office. Maybe you got it online and did it yourself. Maybe you just have the symptoms and you need to get tested. There are different kinds of doctors that typically see people with SIBO. And the first one is a GI, just straight up gastrointestinal doctor. This would be kind of the more traditional route. This is how I got diagnosed because I already had a GI, because again, they thought that I had IBD in the beginning. GIs specialize in a wide variety of different disorders that have to do with your gastrointestinal tract. SIBO is definitely not excluded from this, but it is a newer diagnosis. It's something that there is less research about, and not all practitioners are comfortable with it or very knowledgeable about it. So with any of these doctors I'm going to mention, it's very important that you find out if SIBO is something that they know about, if they've seen other patients with it before, all of those kinds of things. So GI would be typically what they would refer you to in this situation. However, some people are not comfortable with the traditional medicinal route, are not comfortable taking antibiotics, which is often what a GI might prescribe, not always, again. So if you're one of these people, you might be more comfortable with a naturopath. A naturopath may still use traditional medicine, but are typically focused on more herbal and natural remedies to health problems. The third kind of doctor, which I really wanted to go see in addition to my GI, not because I didn't like my GI, but just because this sounded really cool to me, is a functional medicine doctor. Now, a functional medicine doctor can be any type of practitioner. They can be a GI, they can be a naturopath, they can be an internist. However, it is more of a philosophy of the way they practice. It's more of an integrative approach and looking at the person as a whole rather than focusing specifically on one type of diagnosis or one body system. However, none of these doctors were covered by my insurance, so I decided to kind of put that off unless I really, really needed it. So that's first, picking your doctor. Not to say that you can't change or that all doctors within these categories will be the same, but you'll need to kind of make a decision about what type of practitioner you think is going to be best for you. And some of that may have to do with your root cause of SIBO. So many believe that SIBO is typically related to some type of either underlying illness or came from something that happened in your life. It could come from taking too many antibiotics or a variety of different things. Again, the research is fairly limited, but if you have an idea what might have caused this bacterial overgrowth, that might guide you towards what kind of treatment you want to be looking at. So at the doctors, usually they'll suggest a couple of things, and the first is medicine. So antibiotics. Antibiotics are one option that are very commonly used for hydrogen dominant SIBO. The primary drug that there's been the most research on anyway is Xifaxan or rifaximin. This is an antibiotic that's very targeted to the small intestine. So therefore, it typically has less side effects in terms of nausea or other GI symptoms because it stays more in the small intestine than traveling throughout. And it's very helpful for this particular disorder, which is in the small intestine. It has a fairly good success rate for hydrogen folks. However, sometimes it's not the right thing for that person, so they might prescribe something else. For methane, usually they use rifaximin in combination with neomycin, and that is a different antibiotic that for whatever reason is typically more helpful for methane. Some doctors will prescribe a probiotic to go along with the antibiotic. There's a lot of controversy over if you should use probiotics when you have SIBO. Some people swear by it. Like I know someone who has SIBO and she is like, I can't go 2 days without my probiotic, and that's a big part of what helps her get better. There are certain probiotics that are recommended if you do go that route with SIBO. Florastor is the one that my GI recommended, again, just because of the way that it is specifically targeted in your system. Other soil-based probiotics can also be good, all depending on kind of what bacteria you do and don't want in your system. But a probiotic can be helpful to help mitigate some of the negative side effects of an antibiotic. Some believe that you should not use any probiotics because you want to get rid of all of the bacteria. Probiotics do bring in bacteria, and so the thought is just to not use anything and just kind of kill everything off. Aside from antibiotics, the other big thing that people use is herbals. These actually have been studied in research, and for some people can be just as or more effective than antibiotics, but that is definitely not true for everyone. Some people need the antibiotics. So again, not going to advocate one or the other. It really depends on you as a person. There's a whole ton of herbal remedies out there. I'll put some links in the description. I'm not going to go into all the different options. The last thing that you'll probably have to make a decision about, not in your life, but the last main big component of SIBO is diet. Diet after to kind of get after your medication to kind of make sure that everything stays the way it is and to eliminate some of the potentially problematic foods and then reintroduce them into your diet slowly to see what you can and cannot tolerate. Now, some people don't use any diet for SIBO. I know someone with SIBO who she just takes an antibiotic and probiotic anytime that she gets it, clears it right out. She doesn't change her diet at all. For those who do try to go on a more restrictive diet because of the theory that carbs and sugar can feed and grow bacteria, the most common diets are the low FODMAP diet, the SIBO specific diet, the SCD diet, or other variations such as vegan or gluten-free or different types of elimination diets. I will talk about these more in another video, but those are some of the main things that you need to think about when you're diagnosed with SIBO. Unfortunately, because it is a newer diagnosis and there's less research on it, it can be hard to treat and there's no universal treatment. But that being said, it's not something that is expected you're going to have to live with the rest of your life. And for many people, it's not debilitating. It can be very unpleasant, but usually there's no long-lasting damage or doesn't totally prevent you from doing the things that you want to do. But again, it really depends on your situation and if you have any other compounding diagnoses. All right, so that's it for this video. Thanks for listening and tune in next time.